is Aaron. Today, very pleased to be interviewing the CEO and founder of Elrond, Beniamin Mincu. Look forward to talking with him all about Elrond and what Elrond's been up to. Beniamin, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks a lot for having me. Very much looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Does anybody ever call you Ben?
Yes, from time to time, friends, but both Ben and Benjamin work very well.
Excellent. So before we get into Elrond and what is it and all that stuff, just generally speaking, thinking about the whole cryptocurrency market in general, what are you most looking forward to as we get into 2021?
I think that the most fundamental questions that we have and we think about are about how this blockchain technology and cryptocurrency will come together to address what I think are perhaps two of the most important economic problems. One being a kind of systemic problem that we have globally, where you have a very low bandwidth economy, which is opaque and has a lot of perverse incentives. And so you have a kind of systemic problem that you cannot solve from the inside. And so if you can address this in a very creative way, I think there's a huge opportunity and upside for the world to improve as a whole, because then you'll have essentially a high bandwidth economy with a transparent economy that would work really well. And then second, I think perhaps the largest, second largest problem that comes to mind always is this kind of distribution problem, where you have still something like 1.7 billion people that lack infrastructure, basic infrastructure to do any kind of financial exchanges and so forth, and still struggle to carry their lives like one day from another. So to go back to your question, I still believe that we're very, very close to seeing some extremely effective solutions to both of these problems. And this is precisely why we're pushing so hard at Elrond, because we believe we have a very effective solution for this.
Very cool. So let's get into it. Just generally speaking, because we'll get into specifics. What is Elrond? What is the value proposition? We've talked about it on the channel before, but for those who don't know.
Sure. The goal of Elrond is to create high bandwidth, transparent digital economy. And then second, make sure we give anyone, anywhere, easy access to it. And these 2 points go specifically to address the first and the second largest economic problems that I think we have today. How we do this specifically? Well, we've built a blockchain that is 1,000 times more efficient than Ethereum, and we can now process 15,000 transactions per second with a 6-second latency and a 0.0001 cent transaction cost. So having this live, we can now have an economy that can work at the scale of the internet. And then secondly, I believe it's equally important not only to solve this scalability and performance problem, but then make sure that we remove the user experience problem, which is a huge pain in the crypto and blockchain space right now. And so with Maiar, which is a very simple and intuitive yet powerful application, we're trying to build the coolest features with the simplest UX and offer them to the entire world. So to sum up, we have Elrond as an infrastructure on which you can build any kind of dApps or smart contracts or financial applications at the scale of the internet. We have Maiar, which is this simple and intuitive application which is meant to bring crypto, blockchain to the masses, going far outside of what we currently call the crypto space. And then, of course, we have eGold, which is the currency that is native to the Elrond ecosystem and which powers everything.
And I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer, our audience knows that. And from my perception of the market, there seems to be a handful of cryptocurrencies, some from 2017, 2018, some from now that are going after, a faster, cheaper blockchain. So just for the layman, what sort of makes yours better than the competition?
So there are 2 points here. First, that we are basically the standard, the gold standard when it comes to performance, meaning that if you can process something like 15 transactions per second in Ethereum, and then there are variations of this and in this other blockchains like anything below 100 transactions per second, because you've improved a bit on Ethereum, but there's nothing very radical there. In Elrond, you can process 1,000 times that. So Elrond is this blockchain where you have everything Ethereum 2.0 wishes to achieve in the future, you have already live on Elrond. So it's like a blockchain for from the future that you have live now, and you can use this. This is very, very important because not only is the blockchain live, but we have some very cool tools that allow developers to build on Elrond very easily. So we have a Rust framework that allows you to build the smart contracts. We have a very cool IDE that allows you to interact with the Rust framework, with the libraries. We have some examples there. We're actually just pushing to go live with a lot of the key things on the developer kit part. We have a 30% royalty that we pay, or that the protocol pays to anyone who writes smart contracts on Elrond. But more than this, and taking a step back, I think it's important to understand that Elrond is the first blockchain that understands that solving only the technical performance problem will be not enough. We see that we currently have something like 50 million people in the blockchain space, the crypto space, and everyone is trying to just take a few people from the other projects. But what we observe and recognize is that this is a very, very small amount or group of people compared to what we could bring in if we would really solve a real problem. So this is why we put a lot of effort into solving the user experience problem in a way where you don't have to interact with private public keys. You don't really care about them. What you care is being able to send money very easily to anyone in the world, almost instantly at a negligible cost. And by building an application like Maiar directly on Elrond, we're the first, like I said, to escape this kind of narrow group of people and be able to bring a solution for everyone. Where the normal user on the street that doesn't necessarily care about cryptography and all the cool technologies that we basically use, he would be able to use Maiar, send money to his friends, do it really cheaply, really fast, and then understand a lot of what blockchain is just because he can do this directly. So to sum up, Elrond brings this 1,000 times improvement in performance due to the very, very advanced architecture that we've built on state sharding and secure proof of stake. But then in addition to this, we do the extra mile where we build an application where we abstract the entire complexity and offer a very simple and powerful experience to the end user. So I believe that in 2021, this will be the major change that people will see, where it's the game will shift. It becomes obvious how important an obstacle user experience has been, and then also it becomes obvious what the corollary of that is, namely that if you can solve UX very, very good in a very compelling way, at that point you have an addressable market that is 20 times larger than the current market of crypto. So we're super excited about this.
And by the way, for the folks at home, if anybody has any follow-up, want to know more about Elrond, there's links in the description. But one thing I like about the information you guys offer on your website is you take the time, different documents going, this is how we're different from Ethereum. This is how our proof of stake, secure proof of stake, as you call it, is different from what individual projects are doing. So anybody with follow-up questions, definitely check out the website. And just to clarify real quick, when you said Maiar, is that the user interface that people use when they're working with Elrond?
There are obviously also normal wallets. We have a wallet that is already very cool. This is part of the Elrond ecosystem. People can visit it at wallet.elrond.com. But Maiar is an application that is entirely rethought to address a different kind of user. Because we've got so used to the crypto language, to the entire jargon, to all the technicalities, that we were blind to what the normal user perceives or sees. So in order to really think deeply about this, we started from scratch and went through a lot of iterations and discussions and improvements where we tried to simplify things so much that at the end of the day, you're surprised how simple things can become, how useful that they can become, and then how relevant they will be and are for the average user. And for people that are interested in this, Maiar.com is the website where you can get an idea of what we're talking about.
How do you spell that?
So MAIAR.com. We have something like 130,000 people that are already subscribed to the waiting list. Something like 2,000 people are already testing an early version of the application. But I think a lot of what we are discussing right now will change once we have the first very simple application to bring everyone in the space.
And I get what you're saying. You're making things so simple and easy to use that nobody would ever say using your product, oh, this is too difficult, like sending an Ethereum transaction or something. Is that accurate?
Exactly. So the idea is when you send money, you'll do it just like you send an email, not having to think about the protocol, about the encryption that happens within the protocol and how the abstraction is done and so forth. You'll just worry about what's the username. We have this cool things called hero tags, which are essentially a username that everyone will have. You just get the username from someone you want to send money to, then you send the money. Nothing else, because all the other parts are done in a smart way where you have progressive security, which is this idea that when you join an application, the smartest thing is not to demand from the user to go through 10 steps of learning whatever a passphrase really means, private keys and so forth, but rather to let him explore a bit. And then when he has some money or has something to lose, then teach him gradually about some things that he can do, why they're useful and so forth. And it's incredible to see how much this changes the perception of an app and how many people don't just quit your application in the installation process.
Very interesting. And before we talk about like the development that's happening today and what's Elrond doing today, one sort of last question on how did you get here? Like, did you ever buy
let's hear about the
Ethereum
background a little bit.
or Bitcoin? Yeah.
So I think this is always an interesting discussion because for me, it happened that I was essentially studying different technologies that I thought would have a very high impact on the future of humanity. And when I discuss this, I usually refer to genetics or bioengineering or other technologies like artificial intelligence or a broader computer science problem that would be useful. I thought a lot about different startups and grew up with the essays of Paul Graham, just reading the ideas that came through, how he was always teaching different startups in Silicon Valley. And so one of the interesting things for me was this essay where he discussed about the most highest impact or interesting ideas looking very wrong at the beginning. Apparently, all these super interesting ideas start out as almost looking wrong. And for all the people that are, let's say, respectable and don't want to do mistakes and so forth, these ideas always seem unimportant or uninteresting. And then this is how you have all the interesting startups essentially understanding some very powerful insights, experimenting on those or testing the hypothesis of those. And when they find a way to make them work, then you have a very, very interesting effect with that type of technology. And it was this kind of background and sort of also reading people like Peter Thiel, where you learn that startups always start as a secret. It's not obvious. It's not the consensus. You sort of always have to ask yourself, what are the important insights that you believe that most of your friends don't believe yet or have not discovered yet? And so it was this type of context where I stumbled into Bitcoin sometime in 2013. And Bitcoin was sort of the definition of the apparently wrong idea that could have huge potential on the future of our economy and so forth. And then this is how I studied a lot of what Bitcoin was, became super interested in it and everything around the Bitcoin space. Then 6 months after that, I essentially discovered that there were some things that could still be improved in Bitcoin. And so I joined the NEM core team, which attempted to improve some of the features that Bitcoin had and bring some more features actually. And then after that, in 2016, I started a fund together with my brother just because I still saw the problems. The problems were not addressed. And so I saw that there were a few problems that were critical to the blockchain space if we were to see any large-scale adoption. And one of the problems was the scalability problem, which essentially limited everything you saw in the space. And it was very obvious to me from before that point that Ethereum would essentially have this kind of paradoxical problem where the larger the adoption would be, the more obvious your limitations would become. So if you don't have adoption, it's super easy. You can say whatever you want in terms of marketing, but when you have real adoption, the larger the adoption, the more painful it would become, and it would be obvious to everyone that they would not be able to scale. After that point, I essentially invested together with my brother in something like 30 startups, out of which maybe 10 or 15 specifically trying to address this kind of infrastructure problem. None of them did deliver. We tried to help some of them with insights, with the latest research, trying to convince them to go a different route than what they were trying out. And at the end of the day, in 2017, after a long process of learning, experimenting, trying different things, investing in a lot of startups that attempted to solve these problems, and concluding that none of them were going the right direction or route to come up with fruitful or a very radical improvement, we decided to, together with my brother, basically convinced my brother to come and join me. And we gathered a team with which we can literally build rockets. And we attempted to come up with the most advanced solution in the space that would solve the scalability problem once and for all. So this is how Elrond started. We had two particular insights. The first one was that by parallelizing transaction processing through sharding, you could essentially come up with an improvement that was larger than 2 orders of magnitude than what you could process at the time through Bitcoin or Ethereum. This turned out to be even larger of an improvement. So it was not only 100 times of an improvement, but 1,000 times with state sharding. And then second, we thought that if you could scale to such a degree that you can process tens of thousands of transactions per second, it would be very important for you to be able to process transactions very efficient. So not departing from proof of work and going to proof of stake, but more important, addressing some of the security issues that came with proof of stake, and specifically making things very fast in terms of throughput, but then also very, very secure by adding random sampling of the consensus group, resampling from shards to different shards, and making sure that the architecture is not only super scalable, but very, very efficient, and then also very secure.
And you're talking about secure proof of stake is what you just described. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Elrond, like, is there, you guys are the only, I'm not a developer, but secure proof of stake, Elrond's the only people that are a company that's doing that?
So
there's proof of stake.
Yes, there are attempts, different attempts to do something similar in the proof of stake space. But when we came up with these 2 points, Elrond was the first to propose a full mechanism through which you can do both state sharding and secure proof of stake. So Ethereum, just to point out, said that they would do this since 4 years ago. They were attempting, they had like bits and pieces, trials, but they never had a spec where you take an architecture, look over it, then it becomes clear that this can be the thing that scales everything. Then second, there has been a lot of research and discussion in the proof of stake space. And there have been delegated proof of stake versions, different kind of proof of stake versions on other chains. But Elrond specifically came with this idea where things were not only very fast in terms of throughput, but also we had the random sampling of the consensus group, which essentially means that you have a pool of, let's say, 400 nodes. Out of those 400 nodes, you every round, so every 6 seconds, you choose a group of 63 nodes that are part of the consensus. And then in order to prevent any kind of attacks or collusion, every 6 seconds, you reshuffle this group again and again and again. And then every 12 hours, you basically reshuffle 1/3 of nodes from each shard to other shards to increase the level of security even more. So we were the first to not only propose, but then execute to the point where we now have a fully state-chartered architecture working with proof of stake. Ethereum is attempting to launch what is phase 0 sometime in November. So I can tell you from phase 0 to phase 3, it will take another 2-3 years. It's a super painful process, and a lot of things need to add up in order to make it work from the very testing phase to the production level.
Nice. And you talked about Elrond's nodes. How many nodes does Elrond have, or how vast is it? And is that an accurate way to think about it when you're thinking about Elrond's network effect or level of decentralization?
So the idea with the Elrond network is that it's based on adaptive state sharding. What this essentially means is that for each shard that you add to the network, you can process a larger number of transactions. So you can reason about it something like this. You have about 5,000 transactions per second per shard. So we currently have 3 shards plus meta chains, so we can process something like above 15,000 transactions per second. Now, across the network, we have, I believe, 2,169 nodes currently, and the network will expand significantly. There's a very large demand across the network for people to become validator or to delegate more stake. And so we are in the process of now implementing some new features, updates that will allow validators to grow significantly. So from 2,169 to grow to more than 3,000. And then for people to be able to delegate a lot more. Actually, we just announced a new staking phase with a kind of waiting list more than 1 week ago, and the excitement and demand has gone through the roof. We actually even encountered some difficulties on the loading part, because there was a super large group of people that were attempting to do the same thing at the same time in the Elrond wallet. So we improved a few things on that front, and we're now ready to onboard even more people on the staking side.
Wow, interesting. And something that I always look for in blockchains in general is how much developer activity on the network. You can go to third parties and find that. Elrond is always in the top 20, top 10, depending on the month. For what are some, besides like wallet functionality or staking, or maybe go further on that, but what are some dApps that people can expect, or smart contracts on Elrond that the average person could look forward to?
Sure. So the idea that maybe I would first want to underscore is what blockchains really are, because in order for people to understand what we're trying to build, it's useful to note that a kind of hierarchy of difficulty in terms of what you're trying to build allows you to reason a lot better about what's happening. So there's this kind of very simple, let's say, websites that you want to build, and even websites can get a bit more complex, but it's fairly simple to build one. Then you have more complex applications that can integrate a lot more components like cryptography and so forth. But again, they have a limited complexity there. Then you have something like browsers or operating systems. And for this higher layer, layer, you have a very, very high complexity. Now, I would argue that blockchains are either comparable to operating systems or a bit above them in complexity, just because you have computer science, math, cryptography, and game theory for the first time intertwined to build something that is constantly moving, changing, and then you have all this adversarial behavior where in normal applications, you don't have someone trying to attack you every second, like trying to take hold of your entire system and so forth. So there's a very, very high complexity when attempting to build a blockchain, and especially attempting to build one that is 1,000 times more efficient or performant than current versions. Now, having this live, I can tell you, is a major milestone for the entire space, but for the Elrond team and the Elrond community specific, because we know how many failed, and we also know how painful it was. Like the idea is that you might have the money, you might be super smart, but the pain is so high that without sacrifices and insane effort, you'll never reach the point where you have a working network. So now that the network is live, what happens is a gradual enabling of larger or more important features. So you first want to make sure that the network is live and is secure, because if it's not secure, you're losing everything. Now, we have clarified that the network is secure. We left it running for some time, have not made any changes, just to make sure that everything is in place. Now we've added the staking part and the wallet functions. And now we're preparing actually to make a new mainnet upgrade that will enable smart contracts on the Elrond network. We had smart contracts in a testing environment already, so that developers can build things. But again, when we enable that on the mainnet, it's super important that it's secure and it doesn't break the entire network. So now with the smart contract features enabled, we have a set of very interesting tools that will come with this smart contracts. We have a kind of ESDT standard, which is something like an ERC20 for the Elrond network, where this is the specific standard of Elrond. It allows you to create a token that behaves in the network just like the eGold token. It works at native speed, native inexpensive transactions, and so forth. And further on this, we'll have some very, very interesting tools like what you see in the DeFi space. Of course, different versions of stablecoin. We already have BUSD, which is being implemented. We have a collaboration with them, and it's now in the process of being implemented. We'll have other applications on that front. We'll have exchanges and integrations with larger companies. But all of this will take one step at a time. We have currently something like 50 collaborations with companies and partners. And in the background, we're currently working on a few of those to make them available for everyone to be tested and so forth.
Very exciting. Very exciting. You mentioned DeFi a little bit, and I have seen on your website that DeFi is an important component. Could you speak a little bit to how important is it for Elrond to, fit into the DeFi narrative, or how you think about it?
So again, I will go for a second at what I said right at the beginning. I do believe that with the current technology, we can enable some use cases that before were not automatic. The key insight of blockchain is that you can automate some processes that you could not automate before. So you can have transfer of value in an automatic way where you don't need any kind of trusted third party to interact with the transactions. On this building block, you can essentially build anything, and your imagination is the only limit, meaning that if you have an internet scale blockchain, what we've built with Elrond, a blockchain that does not have an inherent limitation in terms of scalability or throughput, then you can take almost any application that you see either currently in the DeFi space or far outside the DeFi space. So whether it's any type of transfer value, any type of derivatives, any type of lending, borrowing, and so forth, or stable coins, this become just a different variation of the software that you want to run on that particular blockchain. So we're now at the point where we've built the blockchain, it's live. We're now preparing to put the tools live, and then we'll have an explosion of use cases that you can finally build. But at the end of the day, I still believe that most of the focus is going in the wrong direction. The fundamental problems that we have are that you really need a new digital high bandwidth, transparent economy. And what this means is that if I could, for instance, send money anywhere in the world almost instantly at a negligible cost so that I can trade whenever I want, I can pay someone, or I can use money in any way, at that point, I would basically lose any interest in paper money. So why would anyone use paper money if you can do all this really easy things, inexpensive things with this native digital money? This is one thing. Then second, if you can have a kind of internet money at internet speed, the next most important thing is to make it available to anyone. Because when you do that, the economy, on the one hand, you could grow the entire global economy 10x just by sheer performance and speed, that you can just do everything more effectively and easily. But then the fact that you bring another 1.7 billion people inside because you offer them the simplest way to interact with money, at that point, I think this is the key, let's say, these are the key problems that we should be solving with DeFi. And in the meantime, of course, there are interesting toys that we'll play with, but we should not lose focus of the fundamental problems.
And by the way,
interesting.
I was impressed with just how many different, seemingly different countries and platforms you're able to get integrated with Elrond. Even in America, there's a couple places where people are able to buy or sell or transact the eGold. Is that hard coming into America because there's so many regulations?
Yes, we are actually quite careful with this aspect, especially with the US, with all the regulation that exists. But after we do our homework on the regulation part, then we try to push as hard as possible. So it's very difficult. Like I said, you might build the blockchain infrastructure, but then when you have the tools, it's tricky to bring the developers, to convince them, to offer them what they need. It's equally difficult to bring liquidity, to list the token on an exchange, to make it freely tradable and accessible. And we strongly believe that eGold is the native currency that will power this new digital economy that we create, that interestingly enough will be able to interact with government money, with other cryptocurrencies, because in Elrond's case, we're not incompatible with government money and the other cryptocurrencies. In fact, we believe that at the end of the day, it's about the user. if we can offer a significantly better solution to the user to have a much better and improved life, then at that point, the governments should want the same thing. And if they want to leverage the Elrond architecture, they can do it. It's just that it will be with a bit different rules. They will not be able to use their rules, but rather they will want to play, use the technology, which is very useful, but do it in a mindful way. Just because the rules are a bit different. And so this is why we're putting a lot of effort into bringing Elrond to a lot of exchanges, a lot of payment processors, and making it as simple as possible to acquire Elrond and then also use it. We'll very soon with this new application have a kind of utility that is probably unparalleled in the space. When I say the new application, I mean Maiar. So yeah, we strongly believe in this, and we believe it should be available everywhere.
Interesting. I did have a question. Is it accurate to describe Elrond at its current state as fully decentralized? I only ask because I know you're still a young project, and for a lot of the younger projects, they get more decentralized over time.
Yeah, so the idea here is that we believe in what is called progressive decentralization. So the key thing is that first, you want to start a network that is very, very high performance, and it's working in its, let's say, aimed parameters. And as you grow, you of course started in a decentralized fashion. So you started with the community, operated with the community, but there is a kind of degree where for the beginning, we need to operate the software in a specific way. It's not up to anyone to change the software at this point, but it will become easy. So it's easy for anyone to make suggestions, but we still have space to improve in the decentralization part, and it's just a matter of time. So once the network has the next level of staking, everyone will be able to become a validator. There's no restriction, and the network will work really well with that configuration. Then on the other hand, I do believe that there are many projects that are essentially useless, although they're decentralized. So decentralization is this kind of feature that cannot be a good in itself. So if you're decentralized but you cannot achieve anything useful, then it's not necessarily anything to be proud of. If you have, on the other hand, a network that is working as it should, and it's useful, and it brings some value, and it's decentralized, at that point, of course, it's much more valuable. And we try to stress this idea that you first need to become useful, and then you can decentralize. Or of course, you need to start with a kind of degree or level of decentralization from the start. Otherwise, there will later not be any kind of incentive to do this. And we've seen some networks like delegated proof of stake networks that have failed, particularly in this respect. But Elrond is built from scratch to achieve a wider decentralization than any kind of proof of stake network up until this point. So we're quite positive of how this process will work.
Very interesting. I like it. And Ben, I know you're a busy guy. I know we have you for maybe 5 more minutes. So I have a few more questions.
I have a couple.
Okay, cool. Perfect. These are sort of grab bag-ish. So maybe we've already sort of addressed it, maybe not. But from the point of view of a crypto holder that's been in the space for a couple of years, so not somebody outside, what would you say is sort of the biggest misconception with Elrond?
I think that the biggest misconception is not necessarily related to Elrond, but maybe related to what it will take to see a wide scale adoption. So I do think that whether you love a specific project or not should basically be a function of what you believe will define success. So given that we currently have a very, very small market and the market is small, I believe it's important to understand why this is the case, why it's small. So it's small because you first have a technology that has not worked at the internet scale. So it's not of internet scale performance. And then secondly, the user experience is still terrible. It basically sucks. So if you can solve these problems in a compelling way, then you'll basically see a much wider addressable market that you can target, serve, and basically capture. So this is why Elrond, I believe the misconception is it's not about the immediate effects that you usually see, but trying to see how things will pan out longer term. If these two problems are solved, and Elrond is the platform on which most of the not only development, but specifically most of the users come in and experience crypto and stay, at that point, you basically want to be on Elrond, because our goal through these two components that we're building is to bring in 1 billion people in the space. So by reasoning from that point backward, we understand that it's not enough to treat user experience as it is right now or treat scalability as it is right now. We definitely need a radical improvement, and this is why we're pushing super hard at Elrond.
I like it. Just a couple kind of random ones. Feel free to say as little as you want on this. You mentioned that you used to work at NEM. How is NEM doing today? Are you still a fan of NEM?
No, actually, I left NEM after about 1 year, just because I thought it was not sufficiently advanced solution. It seemed like a good solution, but then the more I looked into it, became clear that it was not fast enough. We were not moving fast enough. And so I thought if we can start from scratch with all the lessons that I've been through and learned, then perhaps I can really gather a team with which we can push harder than any other team in the space.
Cool. And I did want to ask you about Binance. To the best of my knowledge, Elrond is a Binance Launchpad cryptocurrency. Is that correct? What kind of support does Binance give their Launchpad projects?
We've had a lot of support from Binance throughout the time. Of course, we've launched on Binance. Binance is probably still the largest exchange in the world. And we've been collaborating very, very well with them. What we've always appreciated at the Binance team is their hardcore spirit. So like Elrond, where we're pushing day and night. When we believe we need to do something, we don't sleep, we don't eat. And this is the only way to really move things forward. And then what we discovered was that Binance had this type of spirit. And this is why they keep pushing things, they keep bringing new things in the market. There's a very thorough process for them to validate the project before they work with them. But I think we have a very, very good collaboration with Binance.
I only ask because you see some projects come out of Binance which do okay, but you see some projects really do well. And I put Elrond in that category thus far. So I was just wondering, I guess their job is to connect you with developers or infrastructure, or just make sure that you have everything that you could use if you have the ambition to seek it out. Is that?
Yeah, so I do think that at the end of the day, it's the project responsibility to deliver. Binance will not do your work. They can offer feedback. They can offer connections. They can bring value in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, projects do well or do good because they either bring the value, deliver things over the longer term, or they don't. And of course, there are irrational situations in the market, especially with publicly traded cryptos. But over the longer term, if you see a project only, just failing, it's not Binance. It's the project. So this is why, in our case, we're trying to push as hard as possible.
Of course, of course. And before we get to, I think, our final question, I want you to talk. Okay, well, I guess my final question for the final question is, I wasn't able to verify this. Are you a Binance early investor? That's what I heard.
Yes, but early investor in the sense that, like I said, before starting Elrond, I had a fund. Through this fund, I invested in some 30 projects, and out of these projects, Binance was one. It doesn't mean that I stood with Binance the entire time. I basically put my entire fund on pause, starting with, I think, December 2017, and have only been focusing on Elrond in the meantime. Did not have time for anything else.
Sure, sure. Well, good pick with Binance Exchange. Like you said, it's one of the biggest in the game. Anyway, Austin.
Before we get your final thoughts, just to our Altcoin Daily audience, could you talk about some recent or just the partnerships that Elrond has formed strategically and what you're most excited about from some of them?
Sure. So the idea is that we are one of the projects that, again, are pushing very hard on this adoption side, because we understand that adoption will come in specifically two directions. First, we need a lot of people to hear about Elrond and to start becoming part of the community and the Elrond economy through the eGold token, which, as I said, is the native currency that people can buy and then stake. And then the second element to that is that we want as many companies as possible to come and start building on Elrond. And it is particularly in these two directions that we've been trying to push hard. So exchanges and payment processors make sure that we have a wide outreach and people can buy and exchange Elrond in many countries around the world. We're quite happy with the progress we've seen on that front, although we do have some really cool things that we're still pushing towards. And then on the development side and adoption side, we've announced a number of partnerships, out of which Binance's BUSD is one of the projects. And there are several others like Orion Protocol, and which is a very interesting DEX that will be very soon live on Elrond. And we, of course, have the partnership with Samsung. We have other partnerships that we've discussed about, but the idea right now is to take all of them and process them to have one by one, every one of them live. And as soon as they are live, we're going to see a lot of interesting effects in terms of adoption, token usage, and so forth.
Very interesting. Guys, Ben, I really appreciate you coming on the channel today, man. Thank you for taking the time.
Awesome. I would say that maybe if people want to take away two things, there's Elrond is probably one of the most advanced and scalable architectures in the space now. And then second, Maiar as an application will redefine user experience. But third, the currency, the native currency called eGold, will be the gold standard of our economy that people will be able to use everywhere in very, very creative ways.
I love it.
Very exciting. Where's the best place for our audience to continue their research? Is it elrond.com? Should they follow you on Twitter? Are those the two best places?
Yes, elrond.com is the best place. You'll find a lot of documentation, articles, and so forth. And if you follow Elrond Network on Twitter and myself, any questions your audience has, we'd be very happy to have them in Telegram or any other channel to ping us there to continue the conversation.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ben.
Awesome, guys. Thanks a lot. Really great to have the discussion.